We're going to speak to Benjamin Loughnane, of course, commentator, a man that knows a thing or two about the migration situation in this country, because he's been on Twitter this week down at Napier Barracks down in Folkestone. We've got the news this morning coming from the government that there's a possibility that there will be floating asylum centres planned on retired ferries. Also, ministers are considering putting people who come to this country illegally into other parts of the world. Moldova's been mentioned. New Guinea's been mentioned as well. Let's find out whether this is a viable option. And it sounds like a good idea, but is it something that's workable? Benjamin, a very good morning to you.
Morning.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I was listening to an Australian commentator a little bit earlier this morning who was saying this is very much an idea from Australia, because they actually came up with this idea that if you land on any part of Australia illegally in a small boat, which you have not got permission to use to come to the country, you will never ever be able to settle in the country. And they started resettling these people in sort of island communities.
Yeah, well, I think the government at the moment really like the idea of Australian style, whatever it is, immigration wise, because people look at Australia and think, oh, they're a country who are switched on, they understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But they're a very different country to us, and they've got a lot more in terms of land and island space and all the rest of it. So it is something that is possible, but I don't think we should be too gung-ho about just copying exactly what Australia do. What we really need to be doing is returning people to the countries they come from. In the first place, to stop them from coming over in such great numbers.
But the problem with doing that, of course, is that they try to do that, and whenever they do try to do that, they get thwarted by the human rights lawyers, and people are getting dragged off planes at the sort of 11th hour, and quite often the planes don't end up leaving the country at all.
Yeah, we need to get rid of the Human Rights Act. We need to get rid of Blair's 1999 Immigration Act, and we need to withdraw from the Dublin III agreement at the end of this year. Or, if beforehand we can do so, I think we should fast track that, because at the moment it's incentivizing these crossings in the greatest numbers imaginable. When human traffickers over in France say, oh, they're leaving the EU at the end of the year and it won't be so easy for you to make these crossings after that, which, by the way, isn't true, but it's a very good marketing tactic. So it just drives people to leave. But the first thing we need to do is we need to leave the Dublin III agreement, get out of that, get ourselves out of any sort of bind with EU law. Then we need to start addressing our domestic law. We need to start looking at the Human Rights Act and the Immigration Act, and just get rid of all of the namby-pamby, soft, weak, so-called human rights caveats that exist in it, which create huge loopholes for people to abuse the system.
But are you confident that this government can do that come January, once we leave the European Union? Are they able to do that?
I'm sure they're able. I don't think they're willing. I mean, they've got an 80-seat majority. They're very capable of passing through all sorts of emergency coronavirus legislation. They're perfectly willing to make everybody in the country wear masks and, wash their hands every 20 seconds or whatever it is that they come up with, because they've written it down on the back of a napkin a week before. So if they can do that, then they can probably get a control of the borders if they really want to. But I don't think they want to. I don't know why they wouldn't want to, but based on what I've seen, I can't reach any other conclusion.
No, quite. I see from one of the stories in the papers this morning in the Times that people smugglers are now running cut price deals to get to Britain. I presume that's sort of weather related, where basically they're, for as little as €500, you can book a place on one of these dinghies now, which doesn't bode well, does it, for the autumn?
Well, I suppose it's that funny thing that happens when people buy in bulk. When you've got so many people coming in, and it gets cheaper just because they're making so much money already. Get in while the going's good, as it were. But I was when I went to Napier Barracks, as you know, this week, and we went round the front, and security told us basically to piss off and refused to speak to us. And the one chap who came up to the fence and did speak to us, that is security, not the migrant, he was called back immediately by a superior and given a thrashing. And then when they noticed we had cameras, they started herding all of the migrants into the barracks to try and basically so that we couldn't film any of the migrants in their great numbers. But we went round the back instead, and we found one who was sort of walking very slowly back to the barrack he was supposed to be staying in. And I asked him where he was from and how long he'd been here. And he didn't quite understand at first what I was asking, so I said, have you been here a couple of days, couple of weeks? He went, oh, no, 2 hours. I've been here 2 hours.
Right.
So that, they are coming in fresh and fast. I
suppose the difficulty, I suppose, Benjamin, for us is that you and I have been talking about this for a while. And we've been looking for solutions. Putting people from a boat that's just arrived into a beach situation into a barracks right by the coast seems reasonably efficient, doesn't it? I mean, if you're going to keep, as long as there's a reasonable amount of security, which means that the people who go to these camps aren't just wandering off and going wherever they like, it seems to me to be an improvement on putting them up in a hotel somewhere in the middle of Coventry.
Yeah, well, these barracks are probably about a 25-minute drive from Dover, where they come in, but a lot closer to Dover is the old Dover Detention Centre, which of course they closed down in 2015 totally needlessly. It was entirely fit for purpose. It was built and designed for the job. It had previously been a prison, and it was a detention centre for the past 40 or so years. But at the start of the migrant crisis, they closed it down. And you have to question why on earth they would make such a disastrous decision to get rid of the facility right on the coast, where you can actually stand where the old moats used to be on the bridge and look down, and all you see is the shore. You are within a stone's throw of where people are coming in. But they make all of these bad policy decisions, and then they follow them up with even worse policy decisions, like putting them up in hotels and barracks. But there's a huge optics issue when you have a series of 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 200, whatever, however many people a day that come in, all of which are fighting age males, or almost all of which, and you're putting them up in barracks. I mean, it doesn't inspire confidence, does it?
No, it really doesn't. But as I say, I mean, I suppose most people who live in cities in Britain would rather barracks than hotels, as I say. I mean, we approached Serco a couple of weeks ago and said, are you involved in moving migrants from hotels into these barracks? And they said they were not, which suggests that the hotels are still occupied.
Well, I actually asked the security guy if he worked for Serco. Of course, he totally ignored me, but I got the gist that this wasn't a Serco operation, right. Or if it were a Serco operation, it was in direct integration with the government, because as we know, Serco is effectively a privatized arm of the government. They don't deal with anything apart from government contracts. So why is it being filtered out to this shady private company whose chairman is, of course, Rupert Soames, the brother of Nicholas Soames, and the grandchild of Winston Churchill? It seems to be a bit of a kind of pyramid scheme to me, what's going on here.
Yes.
But when I went round the back, I spoke to this migrant, and I asked him where he was from, and he said he was from Iraq, but he had previously lived in Croydon.
Right.
And I said to him, well, why did you leave Croydon? Why have you gone back to Iraq and then back here? And he said, he sort of looked at me a bit like he didn't really want to reply. And I said, were you deported previously?
Yeah.
And he pretended not to know what the word deported means. Now, I don't know if I'm being cynical here, but if you're an illegal immigrant who has previously been an illegal immigrant in this country, at some point, somewhere or other, you will have heard the word deported or deportation, and you'll understand the concept. So I think he was trying to avoid saying that he had previously been deported and somehow come back, because this is what's going on with the government. If they deport people, they're so weak and they're so lax that they'll just come back.
Right.
They know that, oh, okay, this is a minor setback on my journey to getting asylum in England. I'll just come back and try again. But he certainly wasn't returning from holiday, that's for sure.
No.
And he was designer clothes clad, holding an iPhone, quite a recent iPhone. Yeah. Of which the phone bill is being paid by the British taxpayer, no doubt. And I spoke to one of the locals who drove us around, a taxi driver. He was an immigrant himself, but he was totally on side with us, because he was saying it's disgraceful the way that people are coming in illegally. I had to work hard to get here. It's really disgusting. I see it every day. I live in Dover. I see them coming in. I'll take you down to the beach where I've watched migrants get out of boats and literally run for the hills. Yeah. So they're not even being counted into the figures. He took us down. He showed us where it was all going on. And he told me that what they do when they're on their boats is they take the SIM cards out of their phones and they throw them away. And then when they get into British waters, they dial the emergency number 999 and say, we're stranded in the water, can you come and save us? So, you don't need a SIM to make an emergency call, but they're throwing away their SIMs and their identification cards so that they can't be identified or sent back to where they come from. But they still have their iPhones, they're brand new iPhones, and they don't really care about not having a SIM, because the moment they get to Britain and they're put up in a barracks, they start getting their phone bill paid by the British taxpayer. So for them, it's a bit of a jolly, isn't it? You come over in your designer clothes, where you're from very well-off backgrounds in the countries you're originally from, because, by the way, if you're poor in those countries, you die in those countries. If you're genuinely in need, you have no chance of getting to England because you don't have 30,000 or 20,000, however much it is, to make that journey all the way across through Europe and the Mediterranean into France and then across the Channel.
Although there is some evidence, though, Benjamin, is there not, that some people coming, particularly from places like Sudan, are kind of being run to Britain because once they get here, they then become part of some criminal organisation. So I don't think absolutely everyone is paying. I know some of the ones, people coming from Iran and possibly Iraq are paying, but I think some of the people coming from more sort of deeper parts of Africa are being kind of recruited effectively to come here.
Well, yeah, I think definitely if you look at the sort of breakdown of who these people are, a lot of them being fighting age males who are the kind of people who you would want running your criminal enterprises in this country. Of course, there will be a financial incentive for certain gangs and cohorts to push certain kinds of people through, because they don't want a load of, elderly and needy and all the rest of it. The actual people who probably would be in need of refuge, probably not here, but probably they would be in need of refuge. But fighting age males coming over is very clearly a cynical ploy by certain gangs and traffickers to get certain people
there's
into
no
the country.
doubt, absolutely no doubt. Benjamin, listen, we've got to run because we're running late. Thank you very much indeed. Benjamin Loughnane there reporting into us. He's been down to Napier Barracks. Interesting stories to tell. We'll be talking about this, I'm sure, as time goes on.